who used to live over on the east side, could hear these boats as they were warming up and practicing out here along the shores of Lake Washington. These are the old ones. These are the classic vintage boats. Dave Williams and a slew of volunteers and lovers of this sport have painstakingly put these boats back together and actually gotten them out on the water, and they run, Chip.
You know, if you're watching this broadcast, you must like hydroplane racing. Yeah. You've got to go to the Hydro Museum. It's down just south of South Center, the Raceboat and Hydroplane Museum, where they rebuild these boats. Right now, there's a wonderful project going on. Bill Muncy, maybe the greatest driver ever, the boat that he was killed in is now going under restoration and may even be here at Seafair next year. So go to the museum, check that out.
Now, to restore these, it has to take a lot of money, a lot of effort, and but people who are passionate about it.
That's the word, passion. The boat you see right there on the inside, the Miss Wahoo, that is not actually the real Miss Wahoo. Scott Carson, the past president of Boeing,
sure,
he loved that boat so much as a child that they built an exact replica. The boat you're looking at there is a Thriftway boat. Now that's the boat that made Bill Muncy famous. That was the boat that also, in celebration of Century 21, the Thriftway Corporation gave up the name and put Century 21 on it. Next to that boat, you see the Miss Bardall, the green boat. That was built by Ole Bardall. He was an immigrant, came here to Seattle, fell in love with boat racing, and built that. That was my favorite boat as a kid. The reason I liked it, if you look on the tail, you see a kind of a secret agent looking guy, and he's got a can of oil. I always liked that guy. So that was my boat. It was driven by some wonderful drivers. A guy named Ron Musson drove Bardall boats. Bill Muncy, there you can see the secret agent there on the back. Bill Muncy always said that he felt that Ron Musson was the best boat driver ever. Ron was tragically killed in a horrible 2-weekend period where we lost 4 drivers. There's the...
Now these boats, again, refurbished, rebuilt, but how fast will they go in just this this particular demonstration?
Well, boys will be boys. They've all sat down. These boats are very valuable. They don't want to hurt them. There's no parts. So they all say, let's go really, really slow. One guy gets a little bit faster, and then another guy, and pretty soon it gets out of control. And everybody's going really fast. But these engines are very, very rare. You break one of these engines, you know, when we were racing these engines, they were worth maybe $10,000 to $15,000 a piece. Now they're worth probably $200,000, $250,000 a piece.
My goodness.
So ask me how many of them I stuck away in my basement.
How many?
No, I'm not that smart, Steve. You know that.
I know.
Oh my goodness.
As we continue to watch the vintage boats bounce around, and they're heading up that chute and heading for the north turn, and they're coming right at our Mike Fitzsimmons and Pat O'Day. And gentlemen, you guys as well watched these boats for many, many years, and it's just fun seeing. You know, it's fun seeing the pilots of these boats, the drivers. You can actually make them out in the cockpit, Mike.
Yeah, you sure can. This is the sound I cut school for a lot of times and frustrated the nuns. But I'll tell you what, this was. I was just imagining, you know, when Jenny was talking about Twitter and everything, what would have happened in 1955 when this boat, the Miss Thriftway, did not get the extra 400 points, and Gale 5 won the Gold Cup? What would the twittering have been on that day when they found out that the boat they thought won the cup and kept it in Seattle didn't win the cup and didn't keep it in Seattle? That would have been something else.
It would be a terrifying Twitter attack, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing, we look at these boats and we think back. I see Myra Slovak driving that Wahoo, flipping it over after starting in last place, and in the first lap he's almost to capture first place. You see Bill Muncy, you see Ronnie Musson, you see those great names from our hydroplaning past, and it brings them back to life.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to believe that this Miss Wahoo that you're seeing there was actually built by a fellow who is the crew chief of the Old Boy Oberto, Mike Hansen, a fine, fine craftsman.
And on the outside there, on the outside you see the Oberto boat.
Yeah.
So here we are, how many years later, anticipating a final heat where the Oberto boat is a contender.
Yeah.
There's where the Oberto started in unlimited hydroplane racing. Never really did much, and now look at where they are
And that
today.
is a replica of their first boat in 1975. The actual boat itself, little trivia for you gearheads, that was, are you ready for this? The Dewey's Lumberville and Seafair's Mist one day.
Oh.
Walter Cade, do you remember him?
Absolutely.
He brought it out here to race, of course, in the 70s, and he was a mainstay on this course.
Giving credit where credit's due, Art Oberto, how old is he now?
85.
85. He was out here on the stand. greeting all of us and thanking us for our support. We got to thank him for what he has done year after year after year to keep Seafair alive and exciting.
Pat, how many 3-color pens do you think Art Oberto has handed out from this boat that you're looking at now to the boat we see today?
We're just going to count the number of them we have right here on the desk.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was Art's trade. While his boats were out there racing, Art was walking up and down the beach in a pork pie hat, handing out 3-color pens. And he was always very careful to tell you and point out that indeed it was a 3-color pen. There's the Miss Bartol that's driven today by Dixon Smith, maybe the smartest engineer in all of hydroplane racing.
He was actually a crewman on that boat.
There's
back
Rob
in the
Wheeler.
original 1962 through 65 era.
You're looking at Rob Wheeler driving the Thriftway boat, one of the finest craftsmen I've ever seen. So these were guys that grew up loving this boat. So what it must be for them to actually drive the boats that they sat and watched as children.
You know, Dixon Smith is an interesting name, and he never gets mentioned. I remember a race in Detroit. He was the crew chief for the Pay and Pack, and after the race, he said, "Pat, you want to ride?" And I flew back to Seattle with him in the Learjet. I mean, is that one versatile, wonderful
seasoned
guy?
pilot in his own right, also an incredible guy.
And look how well these boats are running. And that is just a tribute to the thousands and thousands of hours that volunteers, after they've done their regular job, come down to the Hydro Museum and work long and hard to make these boats run. And look how well they're running. They're not popping and banging. There's not one dragging. This is really one of the best exhibitions of vintage boats I've ever seen. They all are going fast. They look good. They're running like they ran when they were competing.
And remember, you don't see them out on the water anymore, except for once a year, perhaps, in an exhibition like this. But you can see them at the Hydroplane Museum.
You bet.
I want to correct that. That's not the case. Come to Chalan in October, and they do a really neat deal. It's kind of a vintage boat festival, and so many people that have helped out at the museum, donated to the museum, worked on the boats. They put 2-seaters in, and they give rides from 8 in the morning till like 5 in the afternoon to people that have really, and that's the reward that the people that put so much in the museum get. They finally get to go for a ride in something they've loved all their life.
You know, Chip, you mentioned boys will be boys, and over in Tri-Cities when these same vintage boats came over to perform, Dixon Smith opened up that Bartol. And he qualified on the regular certified course at 97 miles an hour. Down the back chute, he was seeing 160.
So what would that have been in its day? Would that have been a fast qualifying
That would have been about a mid-average qualifying speed. Real fast was, of course, the record out here on the 3-mile course before it was retired was 120.356 in the Miss Exide, which, by the way, was one of the later names of the Wahoo.
One thing that hasn't changed, Oberto is still pepperoni powered. It's now a turbine pepperoni.
You know, hearing the roar
piston pepperoni.
Chip, hearing the roar of these engines, and it is so loud here at the start-finish line, it brings back recollections of my doing radio 35 years ago, and at the end of the day, you did not know what you had said.
Well,
it was so noisy, you just rattled on and hoped you were telling the people something.
Like Mike said, it almost ruined my high school career because I went to Newport High School, and I could hear them testing in the spring. I'd jump in my car and come down and watch them, and then try to talk my way back into high school. Well, the reason you see them kind of sitting on the side there is that when these boats come off a plane, the bow goes way up in the air and you can't see. So that's another thing that stayed true to hydroplane racing. The new boats now, when you slow them down, the windshield goes awash. The old days, you couldn't see where you were going because the bow was up in the air. So you never have been able to see where you're going.
Well, they've been spectacular to watch, and it's just great, the history lesson. And again, yes, this is a long time ago, but you know, you don't learn anything about know anything about your future if you don't understand what came before and who came before, and the men and the craftsmen and all that they have done to build, as Pat always talks about, what this summer celebration in Seattle has become.
On the Bartol, you see that white flag right in front of the driver on the side there? That's the Burgie. That is the Burgie of the Seattle Yacht Club.
That's right.
And back in the day, I believe, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, that all the boats had to have a yacht club affiliation.
Yes.
Correct. They did indeed, and in fact, Slow Motion 4 and 5 flew those on the tail. And by the way, just for the record, that secret agent man, Blackie Carbon.
Okay, there you go. You've learned something every day you watch this show. Thank you to those who put together the vintage boat race. When we come back, the real thing, the F1s. We've got a championship on our hands. We'll see you right after this.
back now live to the Stan Sayers pits where Steve Rabel is live. And Steve, you're about to give the big congratulations to the winner of the Albert Lee Cup.
I am, Monique, and I'm having a tough time hearing you, actually, because the cheering was so loud for me just a moment ago when you introduced me. But that's all right. Stay put, everybody. Stay put. Welcome to the Seafair Weekend Awards Ceremony, the Albert Lee Cup and the Graham Trucking Cup, and now you can applaud. Way to go, drivers, teams. On this very warm weekend, but an absolutely glorious weekend to be out and around the water. And for that, I guess we have to thank Beth Knox from Seafair, who brings the great weather with her. Beth, this has been a fabulous weekend, actually more than a weekend for Seafair and all of you.
It has been a quintessential Seattle weekend for us. I love that we can have a Seafair holiday right in the middle of summer and celebrate a great weekend.
A lot of people out on the log boom today, a lot of people out along the shore, and a lot of people learned their lesson from years past. They brought lots of water and sunscreen, but you couldn't do this without all of the people out here who were volunteers and the staffs who helped put all this together.
We have so many volunteers that are in the pits, on the land, out on the water. They are working to keep this event safe and fun and enjoyable for everybody. And I'd like to say thank you to all those volunteers.
I have an idea. How about we come back next year and do it again, shall we?
I think that's a deal. Let's do it.
Beth Knox with Seafair, everybody. Thank you, Beth, and thank you to all of your staff. Let's bring up now to present the awards the 2012 Miss Seafair, Veronica Asensei. She's going to assist us with the presentations. Veronica, thank you. To the Hydroplane and Raceboat Museum now for bringing vintage hydroplane racing to Seafair this weekend. This exhibition was just stunning. Let's bring up David Williams, the executive director of the Hydroplane and Raceboat Museum and vintage hydroplane driver. Dave Williams, another great show, and it is terrific, the tradition that Seafair and the hydroplanes have here.
Well, Steve, we are just so proud to be here, and we want to thank Beth Knox and Albert Lee and Seafair, the Thriftway team, the Bardall team, the Oberto team, and of course my Wahoo guys. We had the time of our lives.
How difficult is it to drive those old boats out? The vintage boats, I beg your pardon.
It is so much fun, you can't even call it a work. It's just an absolute blast.
And just think, the boats that we saw racing today will be the vintage boats of about 35 or 40 years from now.
Oh yeah, we'll be back in about 30 years with the Oberto and the Qatar and any other boat we can get our hands on.
Dave Williams from the Raceboat Museum. David, great job again, as always. Thank you.
Guys.
And a presentation right here. And remember, you can see those boats at the museum. It's in Kent, right? Just south of Southside.
Yes. 5917 South 196th Street in Kent. We're open every day but Sunday and Monday.
We hope you wrote that down. And if not, they're on the web. David, thank you. There are a couple of other